Hello my dear listener and welcome to our channel. I was in my third month of retirement, adjusting to my new role as a house husband. I was beginning to think my previous job was easier and more fun than cooking and cleaning. We still retained our weekly cleaning lady, so my chores were more about keeping things tidy. Our kids had long flown the nest, so keeping the house tidy wasn't a burden. I had been given a golden handshake as VP of a large bank, and the offer was too good to turn down. My wife Amy and I, Ed Hughes, by the way, spent countless hours discussing my retirement offer and decided it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I was given $250,000 in cash, with a matching amount going into my 401k, plus 50% of my monthly salary for life. I also kept all my other benefits, including insurance. At age 58, I found myself without a job for the first time since I was a teenager. I had several things I wanted to explore. Writing was one of them, as I had long aspired to write but never found the time. I also wanted to learn woodworking, something I found fascinating, though I had no experience. Amy, my wife of 30 years, is the love of my life. She's 6 years my junior, and at 52, she's changed little since the first time we met back in college. She was a junior while I was in graduate school. I fell in love at first sight and courted her tirelessly for 6 months before she agreed to a date. From there, we dated exclusively and married after she graduated. Our 2 children were born during the second and third year of our marriage, and after that, I got a vasectomy since we agreed 2 kids were enough. Amy was a fantastic mother and stayed at home until both kids started school. Then she got a job in the HR department of a large regional hospital. She's a very caring and unselfish person, and that shines through when she meets new people. Now, our 2 children are settled in professional jobs with families of their own. Neither lives nearby, but both are within a 4-hour drive. Amy has worked at the hospital for 20 years and was promoted last year to Chief of Human Resources, a position with a lot of responsibility and high expectations. Before I go on, let me tell you a bit more about Amy and me. Amy is slender, with ginger hair, standing at 5 feet 6 inches. She's got shapely legs and a sweet figure. She's always had a strong connection with me, and we've enjoyed an active, intimate life. She's attentive and engaged, always making sure we both feel close. I know Amy would be up for more frequent moments together, but I can only manage a couple of times a week. My body needs time to recover. As for me, I'm 58, a bit out of shape, standing at 5 feet 10 inches. One of my retirement goals, besides writing and woodworking, was to lose weight and get back in better condition. Working in a bank doesn't exactly help you stay lean, but with some dedication, I've lost 15 pounds and 2 inches around my waist in just 3 months. I've been going to the gym regularly, and my muscle tone has improved. My gym even has a boxing ring, and I hired one of the older trainers to teach me the basics. Boxing is tough, but after a while, I started to get the hang of it. My body was changing, and I thought Amy would notice when we spent time together, but she never said a word. I was feeling stronger and healthier, but she seemed preoccupied. One night at dinner, I asked her, "You seem distracted lately, like you're in a different world. What's wrong?" Amy hesitated before replying, "Nothing's wrong, I'm just overwhelmed by work." I pressed a little, asking if she wanted to share anything, but she shook her head, saying she just needed to work through it herself. Thanks for asking. So, here's where we left it. Amy has to travel every quarter for an HR meeting. She works at a regional hospital, which is part of a larger network of over 40 hospitals scattered across the South. These meetings, where HR chiefs from various cities gather to discuss strategies, staffing, and financial goals, are typically held from Thursday afternoon through Saturday, with everyone returning on Sunday. The meetings usually take place at a Marriott hotel in whichever city is chosen. This would be Amy's 4th time attending. I know she looks forward to these trips, and because of her position, I encourage her. Networking with other HR chiefs is very beneficial, and often what works for one can work for all. We usually eat dinner around 6:30, even though Amy officially finishes work at 5 o'clock. She's rarely able to come home by then, so I always plan for dinner a little later. If she's going to be late, she usually sends me a text. The Wednesday before her trip, she texted saying she'd be late because she needed to pick up a few things for the conference. I told her no problem, I'd keep her dinner warm. She got home around 8 o'clock with several bags of clothes. Amy always dresses professionally and has a fashionable wardrobe, so I was surprised she needed so many new things for the trip. I was working on my computer while she packed that night. Later, we shared an intimate moment and fell asleep holding each other. I knew I'd miss her over the next few days, but I also knew that when she returned on Sunday, we'd reconnect in a special way. The next morning, we made breakfast together, and as she got in her car to leave, I felt a tear in my eye. We'd only been apart a handful of times during our marriage, and 4 of those were for these conferences. Amy and I kept in touch while she was gone, texting and calling each other. Before I knew it, she was back, and things felt different. She seemed particularly affectionate, and when we reconnected, the experience was even more intense than usual. That Sunday afternoon, she stayed in bed for a while, resting while I prepared dinner. We shared a nice bottle of wine during dinner, but after that, she went back to bed, citing exhaustion. I cleaned up, spent a little time on the computer, and then joined her. The next morning was busy as she got ready for work, and just before she left, she asked me to do her laundry. It was unusual because she always handled it herself after returning from a trip, but she had seemed so tired the day before that I didn't think much of it. I collected her clothes from the bedroom and the bathroom, as I always do, and when I went to turn her pants inside out before washing them, I found a pair of thongs inside. I was surprised. I had asked Amy for years to wear thongs, but she always refused, saying they were uncomfortable. Naturally, I was stunned. Why had she bought and worn them? Surely not for me, I wasn't even there. A wave of emotion washed over me, and I had to sit down. I started to wonder if there was something else going on, if maybe my wife had been unfaithful. The thought of it made me question everything. I decided to check for more clues. I searched her closet and drawers, but didn't find anything unusual. Then I saw her suitcase, still sitting in the closet. Oddly, it was locked. We had matching Samsonite suitcases, so I used my key to open hers. Inside, I found a pair of Jimmy Choo heels with 4-inch heels. Amy has never worn anything higher than 3 inches, and she wouldn't usually spend that much money on shoes she rarely wears. There was also a Ziploc bag with some lingerie, racy thongs, half-cup bras, stockings, and nightgowns. I was speechless. I put everything back and locked the suitcase again, trying to figure out what to do. I loved Amy more than anyone in the world. She was my rock, and we did everything together. I couldn't imagine life without her. That evening, during dinner, I brought it up. I found something strange in the laundry, I said. She looked curious and asked what it was. I'll show you, I replied. I got up, retrieved the thong, and placed it on the table. I found this rolled up in your pants. I've asked you for years to wear thongs, and you've always refused. Is there something you want to tell me? She hesitated for a moment and then said, I bought them for you. Okay, but why did you wear them while you were away? I asked. She rarely got angry, but I could see her face turning red, signaling that she was about to lose her temper. You've never been jealous or questioned anything I've ever done, I replied. You've never given me a reason to be jealous or question you, Amy retorted, her frustration evident. Why are you questioning me now? I have never been unfaithful, not once. Just explain the things, and we'll drop it. Well, you've been asking me for years to buy some, so I did. I wore a pair to see how they felt, I said. Okay, did you buy anything else you want to share? No, I replied shortly. We dropped the subject, but I realized my investigation needed to be stepped up. Amy hadn't been entirely honest and hadn't mentioned the other items in her suitcase. I went to work on my computer, and eventually, Amy went upstairs. I checked the kitchen for her purse and cell phone but didn't find them. Her laptop was still on the table, so I took it into my computer room and locked the door. I checked her home email and found nothing unusual. Her work email was also clear. I noticed the Yahoo account in the history but couldn't access it without the username and password. I needed to check her cell phone. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the shower but didn't know how long Amy had been in there. Her purse was on the dresser, so I quickly grabbed her cell phone and unlocked it. Her text messages revealed nothing. I typed Yahoo Mail in the browser, and since her username and password were saved, I had access. I discovered that David, the man in question, was the HR chief at a hospital several states away. He had been asking Amy to dress provocatively and be more open with him. From what I gathered, they hadn't had sex but had made out seriously. Amy seemed reluctant. I heard the shower turn off, so I quickly closed everything and returned her phone to its place. I had David's first name, his workplace, and some personal details. I used this information to find his full name and history. A quick call to a lawyer friend who has connections with the local police led to the discovery that David had been charged with but not convicted of 3 counts of sexual harassment. While the charges had been dropped, it suggested a troubling pattern. Determined to not only expose David but also ensure he couldn't be involved with Amy, I continued my investigation. The next morning, I accessed Amy's cell phone again, found the Yahoo Mail password, and logged in. The password was the name of Amy's first childhood dog, a detail she had often mentioned. I discovered David's emails, which were like love letters. He had been pursuing Amy since their first conference, slowly escalating his advances. By the last conference, he had reached second base, seemingly hoping for more at the next meeting. I printed out copies of all his emails, which read like love letters. It was clear to me that David was trying to groom Amy. Her responses were typical, brief and to the point. She didn't want an affair, and at the last conference, things had advanced further than she was comfortable with. I started developing a plan for the next conference, aiming to gather enough evidence to take action while also preventing any further inappropriate interactions. I went to Best Buy and bought a mini camera with a transmitter that worked over Wi-Fi. I only had to pair it with my tablet computer after downloading the necessary software. Amy spends a considerable amount of time in her bedroom each night, so I placed the camera there. It had an audio receiver, allowing me to hear and see what was going on. That night, after dinner, Amy went upstairs while I stayed in the computer room. I turned on the camera, and my tablet displayed a view of Amy in our bed. She was relaxing and reading a novel. After about an hour, her cell phone rang. It was David. Luckily, Amy put the conversation on speakerphone. They talked about work, and David mentioned he was looking forward to the next conference to see the different lingerie Amy had bought. Amy didn't promise anything, but simply said, "We'll see." David's comments seemed calculated, and Amy appeared uncomfortable as she fidgeted. I knew I needed to act, so I made some noise going up the stairs and found Amy reading her novel. I brushed my teeth and got into bed beside her. I told her, "I love you to the moon and back, and as you know, I've never looked at another woman. I would be crushed if I ever found you with someone else. You know my feelings on infidelity, this is all I think about. I've never been unfaithful and have no intention to be. What brought on this sudden jealousy?" Amy responded, "I'm sorry, but since finding that thong, I've been confused. I want to believe you, but part of me thinks otherwise. I wish I had never bought it." Weeks passed, and I continued monitoring the mini camera. David called Amy weekly, and they were planning for the conference, so was I. The camera worked perfectly, so I decided to buy another one and install it in Amy's room while she was at a meeting. My goal was to monitor her actions, not to invade her privacy for personal gratification. The week of the conference arrived, and it was in New Orleans, a city that might complicate my plans. I watched Amy pack for 2 days and saw nothing unusual. However, when I took out the trash, I noticed a separate bag in her car's trunk. I suspected she would swap out her clothes at the airport. Amy left the next morning with a kiss and an I love you. I followed her 3 hours later, and at the hotel check-in, I explained that I was Amy's husband and was meeting her. After showing my ID, they gave me a key to her room. Knowing she would be in a meeting from 3 to 5 o'clock, I quickly set up the mini camera in her room, aiming for a view from the door to the bed. Setting up the camera took only 10 minutes. I then approached the check-in desk again, finding a different person working. I requested a room on the same floor as Amy, but a few doors away, to stay as close as possible while being within range of the transmitter. My excuse was to be near the elevator. Luckily, I was assigned a room 3 doors down. Unfortunately, setting up the camera proved challenging. I spent hours trying to establish a connection between the camera, the hotel's Wi-Fi, and my tablet, but I was unsuccessful. The hotel Wi-Fi was much more complicated than the home network, and I couldn't get the camera to connect. Feeling frustrated and disconnected, I decided to call Amy. She answered quickly, surprised by my early call. I told her I was having a strange dream and needed to hear her voice to feel better. We spoke briefly, and she reassured me before heading out to dinner. I mentioned not to have too much fun on Bourbon Street, which made her laugh. While she was out, I slipped into her room and left a dozen red roses with a note saying, "So you won't forget me." After she returned to her room, she called me again, thanked me for the roses, and mentioned her dinner was pleasant with some other female HR chiefs. I asked her to switch to FaceTime so I could see her. I noticed her blouse was undone and asked about it. She said she was getting ready for bed. We said goodnight, and I felt anxious about enduring the next 2 days. On Friday afternoon, after the conference ended, I waited in a bar until I saw Amy and David head to her room. After giving them 45 minutes, I entered her room. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't notice me. I took several photos and a short video with my phone. Eventually, I made my presence known. Amy quickly separated from David, trying to tidy herself up. I told David to leave immediately. Although he wasn't scared of me, he left feeling humiliated. I turned to Amy and asked her to explain what was going on. She apologized and admitted she was confused. She loved me but craved the attention from David. She told me his name was David Becker and that their interactions had started at the first conference and continued since then. She confessed they had been kissing and that she had allowed him to touch her, though she claimed it hadn't gone further. I questioned her about whether she understood that their interactions could lead to more. Amy began to cry and asked if I would stay the weekend with her, as she didn't trust herself to be alone. She lay down, and I watched over her for an hour before waking her. Her eyes were red and swollen. I was extremely angry and hurt but suggested, "Let's dress up and go out to dinner and dancing. Let's try to put this mess behind us. If you want me to stay with you, I will. That man won't get near you again." Amy dressed in some of the sexy clothes she had bought, which made her feel embarrassed. She put on a half bra, a thong, thigh-high stockings, and a figure-hugging black dress with heels. I told her that seeing her in these clothes, which were obviously for David, hurt me. She apologized and promised to wear whatever I asked in the future. Dinner was good, though I ate too much and felt sluggish afterward. We went back to the hotel bar. The dance floor was crowded, and Amy wanted to dance. Thanks to my exercise routine, I was in good shape and enjoyed dancing without getting tired. We had a good time until I excused myself to use the bathroom. When I returned, Amy was on the dance floor with David. I intervened, telling David to keep his hands off my wife now and in the future, and warned him he was lucky I hadn't confronted him earlier. David, who was much larger than me, laughed off my threat and took the first swing. I was caught off guard but managed to get back on my feet. Despite the size difference, I sidestepped him and landed several punches. My gym training paid off, and though David tried to keep coming, I was able to defend myself effectively. Eventually, I kicked him and delivered a final series of blows that left him on the floor. I warned him to stay away from my wife before walking away. Amy rushed to David's side, which confirmed where her loyalty lay. I paid the bill and left, deciding not to press charges despite the barman's offer to smooth things over with the police. I spent the night alone in my old room, unsure if Amy stayed in her own room or with David. The next morning, after removing the camera, I checked out and flew home. When Amy arrived back, I was in the kitchen with my suitcases packed. She asked, "Ed, why did you leave Friday night?" I replied, "Why should I stay? I didn't see much of a marriage left. You decided who you wanted to be with, and it wasn't me." She apologized, saying she was concerned about David's injuries. I responded, "Look at my eye. Does it look normal to you? You spent Friday night with him, and probably all day Saturday too. I can't believe you lied about it." Amy said, "I didn't have sex with him." "I'm tired of your lies," I said. "We've had 30 years of happiness, and you threw it all away for a weekend with him. Did you know he had been charged with sexual harassment 3 times? Amy looked shocked. "No, I didn't know that. You have lied and deceived me for the past several months. I can't express how much you've hurt me. I was onto your game almost from the beginning." Amy looked ashamed. "I beg for your forgiveness. I'm so sorry. I was pressured by David, but I didn't give in. I can't prove it, but you'll have to take my word." I asked, "So you want me to believe you? Why should I trust you now?" Amy responded, "I'm telling the truth. I noticed she wasn't wearing panties." "And what about this? Where are your panties?" Amy explained, "I assumed it was from this morning, just before you left. I'm sorry, it was only one time. Please believe me. After the beating you gave David, he came to my room just before I left for the airport and demanded we have sex. He pressured me until I finally consented. I picked up my suitcases and said, 'My lawyer will be in touch. Be prepared to be destroyed.' I left, feeling betrayed despite all my efforts to save the marriage. Amy had no intentions of staying faithful. If not that weekend, it would have been the next time. Now, let's check the story from Amy's side. A little over a year ago, I was promoted to Chief of HR, a prestigious role I was proud of. My husband, Ed, noticed how I had changed. Part of my job required attending quarterly meetings with other HR chiefs. At the first conference, I met David, an HR chief from another state. David frequently flirted with me, and though I tried to maintain boundaries, his advances grew more persistent. By the third conference, he started kissing me, which flattered me but conflicted with my values. I kept reminding him that I was happily married and didn't want an affair. Despite this, David's advances continued, and he managed to touch me inappropriately. I kept my resolve and didn't let it go further, although he certainly tried. I told myself he was harmless and enjoyed his attention, being flattered by a younger man's interest. When I returned from the conference, Ed found a thong in my dirty laundry. He was hurt and accused me of having an affair, which I denied. Although I hadn't had intercourse, I was deceiving Ed by maintaining what I considered a platonic relationship with David. As the next conference approached, I packed my clothes carefully, hiding them to avoid Ed's scrutiny. During the conference, David's advances continued. He was persistent, and while I resisted, my resolve weakened at times. A phone call from Ed distracted David, and I agreed to meet Ed for dinner. The dinner was lovely, and Ed's gesture of sending roses reminded me of my vows, leading me to once again refuse David's advances. Despite this, David continued to pursue me. During lunch the next day, we nearly crossed the line but ran out of time. By the time we were back in my room, David was all over me, and just as things were getting intense, Ed barged in. I tried to assure Ed that David and I hadn't had sex, but he didn't believe me. He felt that the kissing, the phone calls, and the sexy clothes were enough to betray our trust. I hadn't seen it that way before, but he was right. I was deeply ashamed. I asked Ed to stay the weekend with me, hoping to make things right. Even though I felt like staying in bed and crying, I agreed to go out to dinner with him. Dressed in my provocative underwear and clothes, which I had never worn for Ed, I felt even more guilty. We enjoyed dinner and then went dancing at the hotel. We were having a great time until Ed went to the bathroom, and David appeared. He insisted on having a slow dance with me, clearly wanting to make Ed jealous. David was much bigger than Ed, but an excellent dancer. I interrupted their dance and told David to stay away from me. David called Ed a coward and tried to intimidate him. Then, he hit Ed in the side of the head, stunning him. Ed slowly got back on his feet, and David continued to taunt him and try to hit him again. This time, Ed was prepared and fought back, landing several hits before David ended up on the floor. Seeing David hurt, I went to his side to check on him, but Ed thought I was siding with David and left the hotel. I was shocked by Ed's reaction. Despite being overweight and out of shape, he had fought bravely against a much larger opponent. I didn't think Ed was capable of such violence. I managed to get David back to his room and stayed with him. He was in considerable pain and was still bedridden on Saturday. We ordered room service, and I kept ice packs on his injuries. I said goodbye to him Saturday night. He looked better but was still not back to normal, and we didn't have any physical contact. On Sunday morning, as I was rushing to pack for my early flight, David knocked on the door. He pushed his way in and demanded we have sex before I left. He was forceful, and despite my resistance, he was determined. I tried to delay him by insisting on using protection, knowing we didn't have any, but he produced a condom. He proceeded aggressively, and I found myself unexpectedly aroused by his intensity. David's actions left me physically and emotionally drained. Afterward, I hastily cleaned up, grabbed my bags, and left, feeling overwhelmed and ashamed. The journey home was a blur, and I didn't properly clean up, which I later regretted. Returning home, I was distressed to see the extent of Ed's injuries, and we argued fiercely. Eventually, I confessed everything that happened, but Ed didn't give me a chance to explain. He left, and I collapsed in shock, realizing my marriage had collapsed. Reflecting on the weekend, I recognized that my actions had misled David and that his reaction, though extreme, was partly my fault. I regretted opening the door to him and felt the weight of my betrayal. Back at home, I checked into the Hilton and decided to talk to my children. Using a conference call, I explained the situation and our plans for a divorce. They were heartbroken, and we all cried during the call. Amy soon called, angry at me for telling the children and turning them against her. I was confused and hurt by her reaction. That night, I sent screenshots of David with Amy, first kissing her, then her topless in bed, and more, to David's wife. I felt it was only fair that she knew the truth, even though it wouldn't undo the pain. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer and was referred to a reputable divorce attorney. I went to the bank to divide our assets, including my severance pay and 401k, canceling all joint credit cards and getting one solely in my name. Amy's cell phone was from the hospital. That afternoon, I saw the divorce lawyer and instructed him to be aggressive. I was tired of being the nice guy and wanted him to serve Amy as soon as possible. I also called the hospital's CEO in Atlanta, managing to get a brief meeting with him. I explained how David Becker had inappropriately pursued my wife during HR conferences and provided copies of all related emails. I questioned why the hospital would hire someone with multiple charges of sexual harassment, even if they were not convicted. The CEO was taken aback and promised to investigate. I gave him my fax number to send the email copies and offered to send more photographic evidence if needed. I requested that Becker be terminated, making it clear that while my wife shouldn't be penalized for this situation, she also shouldn't lose her job because of it. That evening, Amy called me, having calmed down. She asked why I had sent the photos and if I was in trouble. I explained that David's wife had shared the photos with the hospital and that David had been fired. Amy was concerned that everything would come out in the divorce court and warned me that the divorce would get messy. I was charging her with adultery, which would complicate things further. Amy expressed concern about David's situation and his family, which included 3 children. I pointed out that her actions had caused significant harm to our own family and questioned why she was more worried about David's troubles than ours. I hung up the phone, not wanting to engage further. I didn't hear from Amy for the rest of the week, but I learned she had been served. I put a deposit on an affordable apartment and moved out of the expensive hotel. I focused on working out, hitting the gym twice a day and boxing in the afternoons. My body was becoming toned, and I was in great shape, having lost significant weight and reached my goal. The gym even threw a party for me, celebrating with carrot juice. Weeks passed, and I discovered through the grapevine that Amy was likely to lose her job due to the affair. Since I was unemployed, I didn't think the court would require me to pay alimony, so I planned to check with my lawyer. About 3 months after our separation, Amy called and asked to meet at Starbucks. She looked good, though a bit thinner. I complimented her on her weight loss, but she didn't acknowledge mine. I had lost 6 inches from my waist and nearly 50 pounds, but she seemed unaware. Amy began to cry, saying she had lost her job and had no job prospects. I reminded her to move out so we could sell the house and noted that she had enough money in the bank to live comfortably for a few years. Although she hinted at wanting to come home, I wasn't interested. She started discussing David again, mentioning that he had lost his job and family. I responded that at least now she wouldn't have to hide what had happened. Amy said she wished she had never met him. I told her I didn't want to talk about David and was focused on moving forward. I said I couldn't trust her anymore and didn't think I could live with her again. Her deceit and lies had ended our marriage. She seemed more concerned about David and his family than our own. I left the meeting feeling resolute, and the divorce was finalized. Almost a year passed, and due to our assets and unemployment, I didn't have to pay alimony. My apartment lease was ending, and I needed to find a new place to live. I didn't want to stay at the old hotel. Although I hadn't heard from Amy directly, my children kept me updated on her situation. They informed me that she wasn't doing well, though she wasn't seeing anyone new and was still in love with me. I was relieved to hear she was seeing a counselor. While searching for a new place to live, I came across a large, 100-year-old fixer-upper on the edge of town. The house had been on the market for 2 years, and although I knew little about renovating old houses, I made a low bid. To my surprise, my bid was accepted. I had a thorough professional inspection done, which revealed extensive work needed. Despite the enormity of the project, I threw myself into the renovation. I only had time to visit the gym once a day, focusing on maintaining my current weight rather than losing more. I worked on the house from morning until evening, and despite the physical strain, I slept better than ever. My body became even more toned and muscular. I hired professionals to replace the roof, update the electrical wiring, and install a new air conditioning system, as these tasks were beyond my capability. Although these services exceeded my budget, I was happy to pay for the quality work. With the extra costs, I had to delay further renovations. I realized I needed help but couldn't afford much, so I placed an ad in the local paper. Responses were minimal, just a few from elderly men and one from a high school student. One hot day, as I worked outside in baggy clothes and a hat, Amy arrived in a car. She stepped out and greeted me. "Hello, Amy. How have you been?" "Not so good," she replied. "I lost my job and am having trouble finding work." "I heard about that. But you have enough savings and investments to get by for a while without needing to work. Why are you here?" "I'd like to volunteer to help you with the house. We worked well together in the past, and I'm willing to help without worrying about pay." I accepted her offer, though I was cautious. We're divorced, and I have no intentions of getting back together. But I need help, so I agreed to your offer. Be here at 7 o'clock in the morning and wear old clothes. Amy showed up at 6:30 the next morning, dressed for work. I was shaving when she arrived, so I told her to help herself to coffee. When I entered the kitchen, wearing shorts and a t-shirt, Amy was taken aback. "What happened to you? You look amazing and you've shaved your head." "I started working out when I retired. I've lost 65 pounds and 6 inches off my waist. I've been lifting weights and now have a six-pack. I lifted my shirt to show her. Oh my God, Ed. How could I have been so blind? Have you been learning how to fight too? Yes, I've been boxing since I retired. If you had paid attention, you would have seen bruises on my body and face when we were together. I've always wondered how you managed to take on David, especially after he knocked you down. I never imagined you'd fight back. I felt I was fighting for the woman I loved. Luck was on my side because he was slow. I've improved a lot since then. He wouldn't stand a chance against me now. I feel so foolish. When I held the top HR job, I thought everyone was beneath me, including you. I shut out everything and everyone that meant something to me. I thought you had changed when you were promoted. You seemed wrapped up in your new role, and even though we were married and living together, you never really saw or listened to me. I'm sorry for being so selfish. I've been seeing a counselor and hope that you can see that it has changed me. We cleaned up the spilled coffee and sat down to discuss the house and the work required. Amy shared that she had always wanted a house like this but never had the time, money, or skills to renovate one. I replied that I still questioned my skill level, and renovating an old house is quite expensive. We both agreed that the house would be wonderful once finished. Amy's perspective was valuable, and I welcomed her input, even though I was unsure how we would work together. I want to make it clear up front that this is just a job for me, and I'm not making any promises beyond that, I said. We're divorced, and I intend to stay that way. I understand, Amy replied. I just want something to keep me busy. I can manage without pay, but I want to feel useful. We've always worked well together, and this is important to me. I want to see the renovation through to the end, and I'll have no expectations when the job is finished. Okay, we'll start by painting the outside walls and windows, then move inside. But first, the outside walls need to be prepped. Amy was much more agile on the ladder than I was, so I let her handle the higher areas. She was efficient and skilled, moving up and down the ladder with ease. We spent 10 days painting the outside of the house. The days were hot, and I usually worked in just my cargo shorts. I noticed Amy glancing at me several times, though I wasn't sure if she liked what she saw. Amy also started wearing less formal clothing, swapping work attire for casual shorts and tank tops. She looked as beautiful as ever. Our working relationship grew stronger each day. We laughed and shared fond memories from the past. Amy packed a picnic lunch for us each day, which we enjoyed under a large oak tree. Our lunches, while not explicitly romantic, felt special, and I started looking forward to them. We worked long days, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., only stopping for lunch or coffee. With both of us working, we accomplished much more, and Amy's efficiency was impressive. Amy began volunteering to stay a few minutes late to cook dinner before heading home. The meals were delicious, and I found myself inviting her to stay for dinner regularly. Despite not wanting to admit it, I noticed we were growing closer. We never argued or discussed her past actions. I enjoyed her company and appreciated her work. She never mentioned her previous mistakes or suggested rekindling our relationship. We simply enjoyed each other's presence. After a year and a half on the market, we finally sold our shared house. We had 30 days to close, which meant we needed to clear out the contents. Amy also needed to find a new place to live. She suggested that, since the furniture was half mine, I should buy out her share and furnish the old house with our furniture. I agreed, thinking that our antique pieces would fit perfectly in the old house. We spent 2 weeks painting and decorating, then hired movers to deliver the furniture. Amy's belongings were packed and stored in my garage. Although the house still needed a lot of work, we moved the furniture in. We both admitted that the house felt like a home and were pleased with our efforts. Go home, shower, put on something nice, and we'll go out to eat to celebrate, I suggested. Amy hesitated, then asked, "Do you mean a date?" "Yes," I replied. "I'll pick you up in an hour." We realized that our old house had no furniture or clothes left, as everything had been packed. Amy planned to stay in a cheap hotel until she found an apartment. "Let's get your suitcases out of the car. You can stay in the guest bedroom until you sort out a place to stay. Use the shower in the hall opposite your room." When Amy came downstairs, she looked stunning, classy and elegant. "You look wonderful. I'd forgotten how well you clean up." "Thanks. I don't have many clothes to choose from." I hadn't expected to be going out to dinner. We enjoyed a bottle of wine with our meal, though both of us were too nervous to fully appreciate the food. After we finished eating, we found a table in the bar area where a band was playing golden oldies, perfect for dancing. I soon found myself holding Amy close. She remarked on how fit I looked, and I asked if she meant it positively. "Oh, it's definitely a good thing," she replied. Returning to our table, I excused myself to use the bathroom. I half expected to find Amy dancing when I came back, but she was still at the table. I asked if anyone had approached her to dance. She mentioned that a few men had asked, but she had told them she was waiting for me. Even after I returned, men continued to ask her to dance, and she kept saying she was saving them for me. While I went to refill our drinks, a woman at the bar started flirting with me. I talked to her a bit too long, and Amy approached her, saying, "Honey, this man is mine. Go find someone else." On the way back to the house, Amy thanked me for a wonderful evening and apologized for the confusion. "I wanted to show my appreciation by taking you out to dinner, but I feel like I may have given the wrong impression," she said. "I'm not sure what to make of it." We didn't talk much for the rest of the night, but the next morning, Amy went out searching for an apartment. I realized I missed having her as a partner. Amy returned later that afternoon looking discouraged. She hadn't found a suitable apartment and was planning to stay in a cheap hotel with weekly rates. "Amy, I've been thinking. I'd like you to continue staying in the spare bedroom. We can move your things in tomorrow. This is a big step for me, so please don't make any assumptions and just give us some space. I know you're not seeing anyone, but if you do start, I ask that you don't bring anyone into this house. I'll accept your offer." I had no luck today and didn't realize how hard finding an apartment would be. I understand about needing space and agree to your request about not bringing anyone to the house. I haven't dated or had any relationships since our last conference. I've been going through months of counseling and am not the same person I was then. I've noticed since we started working together that you've changed too. I like the new you much better." Amy agreed to handle shopping, cooking, and laundry in exchange for staying at the house. We continued working on the renovations, moving furniture to different rooms and refinishing the hardwood floors. Though our progress was slow, we were thorough. I continued my gym routine, and my trainers were impressed with my boxing skills. They encouraged me to enter an upcoming amateur boxing competition. Due to my age, I would be competing in my age group, not by weight. I had never participated in competitive sports before and was quite nervous. Amy and I took the day off for the match. Amy was more anxious than I was, fidgeting throughout. My trainer, now acting as my manager, assisted me in the corner. My first opponent, though in the same age group, was larger but less agile. The match lasted 3 rounds. I took a beating in the first 2 rounds but managed to defeat my opponent in the third. He didn't have the stamina for the full match, and I capitalized on it. I had a 2-day break before my next bout. My second opponent was a skilled boxer, and the match was closely contested. I won by a single point. After another break, I faced my final opponent for the championship title. He had been a semi-pro boxer in his youth but had returned to the sport recently. He was in great shape and proved to be a formidable opponent. During the first round, I was knocked down, but in the second round, I managed to knock him down. In the third round, we fought fiercely, neither of us giving an inch. When he dropped his right hand, I seized the opportunity and landed a decisive blow, knocking him out. The crowd erupted in cheers. Amy rushed into the ring to hug me, tears of pride in her eyes. She had been nervous about me competing but was now thrilled and proud. As I looked around, I saw that many of the cheering crowd were friends and relatives. I hadn't informed anyone about the competition, so Amy must have spread the word. Even our children were there. After the match, I was crowned champion for my age group and received a large trophy. Amy immediately congratulated me with a warm hug and kiss. Unbeknownst to me, she had arranged a celebration afterwards at one of the larger restaurants. This was the first time since our separation that we were both together with our children and their families. The evening was completely comfortable, there was no awkwardness at all. Many friends, some of whom had faded from my life after the divorce, congratulated me and showered me with compliments. Most of them remembered me as heavier, and no one recognized me as I entered the ring, except, of course, for Amy. We continued with the renovation, and the house was finally coming together. Although we were still sleeping in separate bedrooms and not intimate, we were functioning as a couple. We went everywhere together and shared everything. Amy even began joining me at the gym in the evenings. We both knew that eventually, we would need to address our relationship status, but neither of us spoke about it. It lingered on my mind. When Amy's bathroom was being renovated, she started using my bathroom off the master bedroom. One day, I forgot she was in the shower and walked in. I was struck by how fit and youthful she looked, even at 54. My shower was large, with multiple heads, and it took all my willpower not to join her. Seeing her without clothes reminded me of the connection we had, and I was torn about what to do. I knew she would reconcile with me if I asked, and she would likely move back into my bed quickly. Amy, true to her word, never tried to reconcile. I needed to talk to my children, who were aware of our situation, so I set up a conference call. I shared my feelings and asked for their advice regarding their mother. My daughter reminded me of the time Amy had been searching for an apartment and how lost I had felt. She then asked how I would feel if I pushed Amy away now. I admitted that I would feel empty and lost because I had become accustomed to having her around. We were enjoying our time together, so why would I push her away? That night, I took Amy out to one of our favorite restaurants. We shared a bottle of wine and I asked her if she was happy. After a moment of reflection, she replied that she was happy but missed certain things. When I asked what was missing, Amy hesitated but eventually shared, "I miss the intimacy we used to share. I miss being close to you, sleeping in the same bed, and the connection we had." I wanted to know if she thought we could return to where we once were. Amy explained that it would be difficult because we had both changed. She felt like a different person and had regained values she had lost. I agreed that we had both grown, and I asked if she would consider moving back into my bedroom. We would take it slow and see where it led. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I walked out to process everything. Amy and I reconciled, but we didn't remarry. I told her that I didn't want to marry again and that our relationship needed to start fresh, as if we had just met. Only then could I truly move past the past. We became a couple in every sense of the word and were deeply in love. We continued to renovate the old house until it met our satisfaction, and we were extremely proud of the result. Amy and I did most of the work ourselves, having never attempted such a project before. Once the house was finished, we focused on landscaping the yard. I continued going to the gym and boxing, though I had no plans to compete again. Neither of us planned to return to work, relying instead on my pension and our investments. We weren't wealthy, but we were content. As long as we were in love, that was enough. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.